Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Tara. I am here with Tsanonda Edwards. We are going to be having such an important conversation today on dads and men dealing with grief and loss. So, Tsanonda, I want to welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Tara. Excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Yes, we're going to wait just a few seconds just to give people a chance to come on, sign in. If you once you come on, give us a wave, let us know that you're on, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds.
Awesome.
As we wait, one of the things that I always like to do is give people just a little bit of background information about why we chose this topic and why I'm reaching out to, well, these guests specifically. Hey, Kim. When we think about grief and loss, one of the biggest things or one of the biggest segments or populations that are often overlooked is men, specifically Black men. However, when you think about the losses that so many people have endured, Black men are up there, and so it was so important to me as we stretch out and we're ending our celebration and recognition of just dope dads, and how grief and loss impacts you not as just a parent, as a man, but also as a parent, and how it shapes your parenting. And so I just want to give people a background about why we chose this topic. We're both in Baltimore. Baltimore is a city that is not immune to people experiencing grief and loss. I think Baltimore is a city, however, that does not do enough to support survivors of people who are going through grief and loss. And so I just want to thank you, Tsanonda, for joining me this evening. And I know that this segment and what you have to share will be so important, and people will walk away with just more knowledge and more tips on how to deal with this too. So I want to welcome Tsanonda Edwards. He is a father, he is an advocate, he is a business owner, an author. So we're going to get into all of that towards the end, just to give more people some time. But I want to jump right into the conversation. So when we think about grief and loss, that deals with emotions, that deals with emotional wellness, that deals with mental health. Why, can you give us a little bit of background about why you chose your platform to discuss grief and loss, and why was it important to you as a man, specifically as a man of color, to use your platform to discuss this important issue?
Wow, that's a great question. It's interesting. I actually, if I could take complete credit for it, I would, but I can't. So my cousin, Michelle Evans, she's also my manager, amazing Michelle Evans. I was actually in the process of writing a book. It wasn't the book that I actually got published. I was kind of writing a book that was going to kind of loosely be based on myself and my friends and our kind of journeys in high school. So I'm writing this fiction book, a little best man type thing, change some names up, that type of thing, right? So I actually I was journaling previously for years. I had been journaling. And being someone who likes to write, I started kind of putting my journals together and making it into a format that was similar to what a book would look like. So I let my cousin take a look at the book. She's reading it, and she finished it, and she just said, "No, this is the one you need to come out with." And I'm like, "Why this one?" And she said, "We are at a point where the light that's being shed on mental health has to be brightened." So she said, and this will absolutely help with that. And I was kind of like, wow, okay. And initially, I wasn't sure about it. The book definitely talks about my life. And I go into detail about my relationship with my mom, my relationship with my dad, things we'll talk about later. And I was being very honest and upfront about those things. So there was a little bit of nervousness behind it. There was a little bit of anxiety behind it. But she said that it was definitely something that was needed. Fast forward maybe a year or two later, I had a session with a social worker. And it was funny. I was kind of getting what I call like a faux therapy session. And I'm sure you've probably been a part of this. You know how you might be in the space with someone. And because, again, you're a therapist, you know this stuff. So, you're Dr. Tara. So people were talking to you and they kind of, what do you think about this? Or, that type of thing. I was actually sharing an office with a social worker. Her name is Akemi McCoy. She's amazing. And I was talking to her about things and she was listening. And then she was kind of telling me, okay, you might need to press forward. If you have this book that you want to put out, you need to press forward with that. And kind of what it'll do is it will help your healing process. And in her kind of reading part of it, she said it will absolutely help men who are not used to really, really putting themselves out there and being honest and upfront about what's going on with them. So after, kind of giving it some thought, and I still didn't do it then. I kind of, you give it thought, you give it prayer. And I figured that, it's time to kind of come out with this and kind of let the healing process begin. How it doesn't always start as healing. There's some hurt that goes behind it. There's some things that you have to deal with regard to those who may have been mentioned in the book. But at the same time, you have to kind of get through that healing process. And again, having the opportunity to kind of voice my thoughts on the matter and knowing that men will hopefully, at that time, will hopefully kind of listen and kind of glean some insight and then find the courage to kind of talk about themselves. And then I started finding my DMs and my text messages and men just like, bro, thank you. Being stopped at homecoming. Shout out to MSU, Morgan State all day. Kind of being stopped at homecoming and hugs. And I appreciate you, man. I read your book. Thank you for saying that. More of us need to talk about these things. And so it was one of those things that, sometimes you get kind of pushed into a situation. And it has been absolutely one of the most beneficial things for me. My Akaya made that social worker. She is now my therapist. And she actually told me, when you get an opportunity to find your voice, you absolutely have to take it. It's not always about helping others, but that's a natural byproduct of finding your voice. Right. And that's exactly what it's been for me.
And I think too, just a byproduct of healing, right? So if we look at anytime there's a loss, to me, just being an advocate of trauma-informed care, there's a trauma that occurs, right? And sometimes we can get so stuck in that trauma or in that loss that we don't even think that one, healing is possible, or two, that we're even worthy of healing. So we live in this state, like when you were talking about, the hurt, or I'm thinking about the stages of grief and loss. The first stage is denial and then anger, right? Who am I angry? I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at the person. I'm angry at the situation. I'm angry at everybody. Or the next stage is bargaining, those if-then thoughts. If this wouldn't have happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And then depression and, then finally, hopefully acceptance. But as a man, and specifically as a Black man, that allowance of going through this cycle is not always socially accepted, right? A lot of times Black men in particular get put in that anger stage, right? I'm just angry, and not even recognizing it or knowing it. And when you think about your own journey with grief and loss, and just to give everybody a background, your grief and loss specifically is in the relation to the loss of your father, who committed suicide, which is something we'll get into, but also carries a huge stigma within the African American or Black community. But staying within that anger stage, did you find yourself struggling to allow yourself to feel the wide range of emotions that come with this? And if so, how did you do that? How did you come out of it?
Absolutely. So just like you said, it's really interesting how those kind of stages work and how like you said, you go through those stages and you don't even know that you're going through those stages. Right. It took a while for me to really get through that denial stage. It was just like, my dad, no. And the fact that I'm a product of a divorce. I didn't see my dad. I saw my dad pretty much like every other weekend. We had kind of like the every other weekend thing going. So, but there were some times when it was like, no, I'm not going to go to dad's house today. I'll just stay with mom. So when getting that phone call that dad had passed, it was kind of like, really? No, that's not it. And then for literally for months, it was kind of like, oh, I know that he's dead, but there's still that denial part of it. And then, like you said, the anger part. You get into that part, and I was there for a number of reasons. One, because honestly, one of my biggest kind of transitions in growing was with regard to my relationship with my mom. My mom was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And we're at a point now where we're healing our relationship. But at that time, it was very difficult because as Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't go into churches. So when my dad had his funeral, I wasn't allowed to go to his funeral because we couldn't enter into churches. So you don't get that opportunity for at least a part of that closure to happen that you're looking for. So there was anger toward her. And I would honestly say that my brother, he actually had a lot of anger toward my father. And I saw it then. Wow. I saw it later on when he kind of talked about just, I can't believe that he decided to take that way out. Like, he has children. Why would he go through that? And being someone who was generally accepting of things, my anger was really kind of focused toward mom for not allowing me to get that closure. But the reality of it is my dad took his life for the reasons that he decided to do it. So that anger could have been something that you kind of go through, but you have to kind of push yourself and prod yourself to really, really push to get through it. And then you get to, like you said, the bargaining, and then you get to the acceptance. But the acceptance came way later. It's just a quick kind of aside to it is, I was in private school when my dad committed suicide. Literally 3 months prior to his suicide, he asked about how we would feel if we had to leave going to private school. And my brother and I were like over the top excited. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. We finally get to go to school with our cousins. No more private school. We can wear regular clothes. Like, oh, this is going to be amazing. Right. And I'll never forget his reaction. He was angry. Like, he's hurting because he can't provide this education. He can't afford to provide this education anymore. And my brother and I are over the top excited. So 3 months later, he commits suicide. And for years, I blamed myself. I thought it was me. I got excited at this time, and that's the reason he committed suicide. Later on, you find out that dad suffered from bipolar disorder, manic depression. I literally found that out maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. So you're able to put the pieces together, right? But in the beginning, that beginning stage, it was a lot of anger at mom, anger at myself, completely. But you get to a point where, again, you push yourself to heal. And again, with that loss piece, again, with men, it's so easy for us to talk about outside things, but when it comes to being honest and being upfront about some of the things that we're dealing with that's hurting us, it's extremely difficult for us to do that. It just is. It's easier for us to be angry, and honestly, it's not just easier, but it's much more culturally accepted. It's much more accepted in our families. Oh, he's just angry. Let him be angry for a little while. Like, it's accepted. It's okay. But we have to, again, kind of find a way to kind of push and prod ourselves to get through those stages so that we can get to the acceptance stage and really figure out ways to kind of heal ourselves in a much more healthy, obviously a healthier way.
And I think one of the things that you said too was the socially acceptable part, right? So, Matt, I want to just acknowledge his comment. It's programmed in us to be angry. You know, I just want to share. I'm doing a group for women in recovery on trauma, helping them to understand how trauma has impacted them. And, you know, it's in one of Baltimore's finest neighborhoods. So and when I pulled up, you know, Jump Out Boys, the undercovers were literally harassing these two guys just walking from the store, right? And like, you could see their faces were like, come on, like, it's hot. We just trying to get something to drink, you know? And I just want to acknowledge what Matt said, like, it's programmed, and you see that as a child, and you see the images that are reflected on you. And at the same time, you know, one of the things that I always say when I'm doing grief and loss groups, the brain is not programmed to deal with inner life issues. You know, you literally have children who are losing friends, who are losing family members. When your father, your brain is not programmed to take that all in. And then when you deal with it, when it becomes a common occurrence, you know, the way that the brain normalizes it just in order for you to survive, right? Like, in order for you to survive, you have to normalize it. And so, like, when you were talking about, you know, your anger directed at your mom, in order for me to accept that my dad is no longer here, I have to project that on to someone too, you know? And so just giving yourself the space to, one, even acknowledge that, and two, you know, not let it manifest in different ways, because I think sometimes what we see is grief manifesting, because that anger is there, manifesting itself in self-harm, you know, dangerous relationships, making unhealthy decisions, or getting in unhealthy relationships. Did you find yourself going through any of that, or what did you kind of cling to help move you through these phases and progressions?
Absolutely. So my big thing, first of all, testament again to Matt, like when he talked about it being
Mm-hmm.
programmed in us.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. We are at a point where, again, it's being programmed, but it's also so prevalent that it
Mm-hmm.
becomes accepted. Literally, one of the primary reasons you mentioned, one of my businesses above it all, it's a mental health organization offering PRP services, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started this organization with a few of my best friends, and one of the primary reasons why we started the organization was because we sat down with one of the co-founders, Brandon Wiley, his father, Al Wiley.
Mm-hmm.
He sat down and he literally said, I'm tired. And again, they own Wiley Funeral Home.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. Literally, you have teenagers coming to funeral after funeral after funeral.
Wow.
That's that grief. That's that loss, right? And then after they've come to 2 and 3 funerals in a week, the next week they're in the casket. And so their friends now have to grieve them, but they're used to it. They're numb to it. And again, and being used to it, just as you know, but that those feelings, that grief, dealing with the loss that they have to deal with, it's bound to show itself in some ways. You talked about unhealthy behaviors, finding ways to do different things that aren't as healthy, but it's going to kind of give you an outlet, an opportunity to kind of show the anger that you have or what have you. So it's so prevalent and it's so programmed into us because again, it's okay for us to be angry. It's okay for us to hold those feelings inside. Like it's literally better for us to have brain aneurysms. It's better for us to have a heart attack and hold all of this stuff inside of us. And if you notice, these types of illnesses are happening younger and younger and younger. And I think one of the major parts of it, one of the major reasons is because it's okay. You talked about finding unhealthy ways to do it, finding those coping mechanisms, right? So it's okay for me to sit with my homeboys and talk about and go drinking. That's fine. That's the way you're supposed to do it. It's okay for us to talk about engaging in countless sexual acts and things of that nature and find those and talking to my friends about it. Those things are absolutely fine, but it's not okay for me to say, bro, I'm hurting. I'm hurting, man. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. I'm hurting. So we have to kind of, again, when you talked about deprogramming that, we have to find ways to deprogram that and make it okay to position ourselves and put the correct people around us. I know we're going to talk about support systems later, but just kind of position ourselves around the right people and the right resources that'll give us the opportunity to speak on what's ailing us from a mental standpoint, because again, mentally and emotionally it's eventually going to kind of lead to physical ailments and things of that nature. So we have to get to a point where we're figuring out ways to deprogram the norm. We have to. And the crazy thing about it is I talk to men often and a lot of them will say, man, I'm good, I'm straight. PTSD, man, none of that. And then you kind of ask a question like, so when we were younger and clubbing, a little older now, but when we were younger and clubbing, did you ever back into a parking spot so you would be ready to leave, ready to dip out in case something jump off? Well, yeah, I mean, I still do that. PTSD, bro. We're programmed to do that. Do you ever go into a restaurant and you generally make sure you don't sit with your back to the door? You make sure you sit in a place where you can see everything that's going on around you in case something jump off? I mean, yeah, I do that. PTSD, bro. We're programmed to do those types of things. So we have to get to a point. Or I lost a friend that way. He was slipping. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. Didn't know what was going on with him. So again, we have to deprogram or have an understanding that these are the reasons why we have certain behaviors that you don't even know that you have, but we're going through them and we have to figure out ways to help.
You're absolutely right. And I want to touch back on what you just said, and it also goes back into what Matt just wrote too, that support system, stand up for our brothers and stand with them. So many men, so many Black men don't even recognize that they're in this cycle of grief and loss, right? Because also, just like anger's been programming in us, coping behaviors have been programming us, right? It's more socially acceptable, like you said, to break myself into a stupor, laugh that off, right? Walk that off, still go to work on Monday, and so I'm not even dealing with it, right? I mean, I'm kind of in between that denial and anger stage, And so how do you find that your platform, your book, The Extraordinary Mr. Nobody, The Beginner's Guide to Self-Healing, your mental health agency above it all has allowed you to connect with men, with fathers, to give them really, I remember when I was in school, one of my supervisors said that the role of the therapist is to give people permission to feel, and then permission to take control of their lives, right? Like that is your role, to give this permission. And so using your platform, how have you found that it's given you that chance to stand with and stand up and give that permission to men?
Absolutely. So I want to again just start with my therapist, Akami McCoy. She said that, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but it was probably the most profound statement to me. And because of that, I'm going to repeat it, and I repeat it often. One of the biggest issues, or I would say one of the biggest reasons why mental health is so prevalent, why depression is so prevalent, is when you find yourself without a voice. That when you feel like you have to internalize everything, that's when depression and mental health issues, come around. And look, Dr. Kim Green said it, permission to feel. When you have permission to feel how you feel, when you have permission to voice how you feel, it is a game changer. And with men in particular, and one of the reasons why I do the work that I do is because men have found their voice in certain ways, but they have not really found their voice with regard to speaking on the difficult subject of, again, I'm hurting. I'm beyond sad right now. I don't know what's going on, because again, we have to make sure that we're covering our families. We have to make sure we're pushing to cover ourselves. We have to be there for our friends when we see things going on with them, but they're still not voicing it. So I've pushed my platform. I'm very big on being an author. I'm big on narrative. I'm big on people's stories. Another thing that my therapist told me is I always had this kind of anxiety about going out and speaking and being an advocate for myself. And she said the most amazing thing about being you is that you're an expert at it. And so you have to push that. And that's really what building this platform is about. It's about making sure that people in general, but men in particular, understand that you are an expert in you, and ignoring the things that are going on with you, ignoring some of the issues that we're having, ignoring some of the ways that we're finding unhealthy ways to cope with some of our biggest problems. We have to get better at that. And that's probably the primary reason I wanted to do it. But then again, you talk about having children. The only way we're going to be able to be effective fathers, effective husbands, is if we're honest with ourselves. Reflection is a huge word. Reflect. You have to reflect on some of the things that have gone on. I'm not saying dwell in the past. You can't dwell in the past, but it's okay to kind of reflect on some of the things that you're going on. Reflect on the reasons for why you're doing some of the things that you've done or that you're doing. And again, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book. I wanted people to kind of use me once I prayed on it and I was able to be honest about some things. I kind of tell people, I want to put my life out there, and I want people to use me as a crash dummy. What would you have done differently? Where would you have made a better decision? But at the same time, I also need you to, now I need you to think about some of the things that you've done in your past. Think about some of the decisions that you've made. Think about some of the reasons why you don't do the things that you're supposed to do. Really reflect on those things and then find ways to be problem solvers. But again, it's about being an expert on yourself. And when you're able to do that, you're able to kind of push yourself again into that healing process. But again, that's probably the primary reason why I really chose this kind of mental health platform. It's something that I've dealt with. I've been diagnosed with depression. I've been diagnosed with, well, not diagnosed with anxiety, just approaching anxiety, but being able to put a name on it, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Or I kind of like to say I am crazy, but I kind of look at it like, but you know what I'm saying, right? And I kind of look at it too. And I'm going to coin this, so I want you to trademark it for me, Dr. Tara. I say, lean into your crazy. Lean into it. Reflect on that thing. Figure out what's going on, and then, hey, let's figure out ways to heal. And when we're able to do that, then we're in a better place. But that's probably the primary reason. Again, being able to have a voice for myself, because when I go out speaking to people, it's a little bit more healing for me. Selfishly, it's healing for me. But being able to kind of touch on those lives and allow people to have their voice and encourage them to have their voice and seek the healing that they not only require but deserve is a really big reason for doing it.
I want to touch on one thing that you said, and that Erica also said. What happens when a man blocks out things from his past and he's not able to reflect on it? Do you want to speak to that, and I'll follow up with what you said too?
Please. So the way I would say it is, if ever you're at a point where you can't reflect on things, I think there's a reason why. Mm-hmm. Again, why you're blocking those things out. So again, I'm not an expert, you're the doc, but my suggestion is always finding ways to be solution driven. In other words, if there is something in your past that's causing some type of negative behavior, then let's figure out ways to kind of change that negative behavior, regardless of the reason. And yes, obviously it's important to find root causes. That's important. But if we're ever at a point where we can figure out, okay, this is an issue that you're having. Here's the issue. Here's the problem. We're not going to think about the root of it. We don't have to reflect on it right now. But if we can find ways to push ourselves to solve the problems and get better at solving the problems, if you're honest about the problem the problem that you're facing, and you're able to find ways to kind of fix it or solve it, then I think you're in a much better place. And potentially that could lead to further reflection. Once you found, I always say that incentive, and a homeboy of mine, Derek Kane, shouts to Derek Kane, he talks about, man, sometimes incentive works a little bit better. So if you're finding ways to solve problems and you're doing good and you're kind of patting yourself on your back for kind of solving problems and moving away from destructive behaviors, then that might allow you the chance to open up a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And potentially reflection can potentially come from that.
I agree. I think the only thing I would just add, just again, like looking at it from a trauma standpoint, is you want to honor your brain's purpose, right? Your brain's purpose is to keep you alive. And so if I can't deal with this, it's like you said, it's for a reason. I have blocked this out because my brain has interpreted it as something that will harm me if I were to be triggered. And, healing always starts in the present. A lot of times we push people, and I'm, my training was, and I still believe this, you never have to tell me your trauma, right? You never have to tell me it. I can see your trauma from the moment you walk in your door, right? Like I was talking to a girlfriend of mine. I was like, oh, something happened to him when he was little. And I said, and she's like, well, he did mention such and such. I was like, you can see it in your present behaviors, right? And so if we can start with what's going on in your present life, if we can start with where you are today, just like you said, it's going to open the doorway. And the reason why I say you never have to talk about trauma is because it's going to reveal itself the more you begin to heal. Healing is a lifelong journey. It's never I've gotten here, I've healed all this stuff. You're not just healing for yourself. I'm healing my mama, I'm healing my grandmother, I'm healing all these things that have been passed down. So once I get to a certain point, that's what you get to another level of healing. Like, oh wait, I didn't even know I had to deal with this.
Yes.
So, it's just like you said, you being able to be solution-based. I'm doing this thing and it's impacting me this way. It's impacting people I love this way. And I want to change that. And once you change, do that small pivot, what's easiest? Where is it easiest to start? You're going to see that trickle down effect. And hopefully by just changing the easiest thing, you've learned to build a skill that you can then apply as other things start to reveal itself, because you always want to set yourself up for success. I don't want to deal with the hardest thing and I don't have any coping skills. Right.
Absolutely.
So I touch on it. I'm going to let my defense mechanisms build up. I'm going to let my unhealthy coping skills build back up. And you know what? I'm not going to touch on it for 5 more years, 10 more years, right. or my children are going to have to deal with it. So, I just agree with everything that you said about that. One of the things that you also mentioned too, and I want to go back to one of Matt's points too. He mentioned a comment. He said a comment about someone who is trying to share and the stigma or the backlash that they receive from that. It's so important. My tagline is let's heal together. It's so important to find villages, a person, someone, right, that is safe, right? What has that journey been like for you to find and create your villages of support that would give you the space to be authentic with where you are in your process?
Right. So I think that it is important, probably the biggest thing to have, one of the key I would say the key just objects, things, just so important, is that support system. It is nothing like it. I think that we have the ability to find people who think the same way we think, in so many different areas. For instance, it's easy for us to find, if I'm a Laker fan, I'm going to find other Laker fans. If I'm a, if I'm a Ravens fan, I'm going to find other Ravens fans, right? So we have to find ways to kind of do that in the mental health realm. We have to find people who are okay with sharing. Sometimes you got to feel it out. You definitely have to feel it out. Again, shouts to Matt Prescott. He's one of the people who I go to, when I'm feeling a certain type of way. He's one of the guys I know. And again, we met each other a few years ago, probably maybe about maybe 10 years ago, but that's one of those guys I can kind of go to. So you have to kind of find those people, those kind of familiar villagers, those folks who, deal with things, are honest with them, and are able to be open about those things. But I just believe that building the correct support system is absolutely necessary. When I was in high school, and again, on reflection, I didn't know that I was depressed in high school. What I did know was that I would go to school. I would have the absolute time of my life. Teachers hated it, but I had the time of my life. Shouts out to Baltimore City College, the best high school on the planet. But when I was there, had the time of my life. And then I would go home. I would immediately go to sleep. Immediately. Wow. No homework, no nothing. I would probably wake up maybe around 9:30, 10 o'clock when I knew my mom was going to be going to sleep. Then I would wake up. Maybe eat something, play some video games or whatever it is, and then maybe go back to sleep around 4, 5, or 6 in the morning, wake up again and get ready to start my day over. Didn't know I was depressed. On reflection, I knew that. But what helped me in high school was finding men who, young men at that time, boys at that time, right? Who were cool and were just accepting. Shouts to Mike, Brandon, and Jamie. Those are my guys, my best friends until this day. But when you have young men who are open, so you find those villagers who you can trust, you can be open with, you can be honest with. And even now to this day, we've made kind of a pact with one another, man. If something's going on, we need to let each other know. We check in on each other continuously and consistently. And we have to, again, be honest about things. Brandon did not know that I dealt with anxiety until I told him. So that's another important part. Finding people who it's okay to be transparent with, and also being able to, again, find your voice and being able to say it. But I also will say that City Forever, Erica, got you. But I will also say we have to be honest about those people. And this is kind of an aside, but I think it's very important. We honestly also have to be honest about the people who we know are toxic. Yes. We have to be honest about the people who we can't include in our village. Again, while my relationship with my mom is absolutely healing, and I'm grateful for it, I do know that we still have struggles in our relationship. So I'm the first person she calls when her car gets stolen. Like I shared with you today. She has it back. She's absolutely fine. But she's also I'm one of the first people that she calls when she has to go to the hospital. She's not feeling well. So I do those things. I make sure that she gets to the hospital. I'll make sure that I'm taking care of her in any and every way that I possibly can. But once she's healed, I know there are certain questions she's going to ask that are going to serve as triggers for me. So I know it's time for me to exit stage right. And one of the things that my therapist helped me to learn is changing the channel. You know what I'm saying? Like while we're talking, hey, you should come back to being a Jehovah's Witness. Mom, did you eat today? I need to make sure that you ate. You know what I mean? Like you have to do those types of things. But again, finding the correct village, finding the people that are going to support you and listen to you and you can be transparent with, but also realizing those people who aren't very good for that. And I'm not saying completely just kind of push off your family members and friends and things of that nature. But if you need to limit your time, especially with family, because sometimes there are some family members who you can't, but figure out ways to limit your time with them. As my mom used to say, some people you can take in doses. So that's what you have to do. And you have to make sure of that.
But yeah, and I think too, and I want to acknowledge Kizzy's question about, what do you do? How do you communicate to someone that you can't be that village for them? I think it's so important, like you were saying, to be transparent and honest with yourself. I think so often we put that pressure on ourselves to be all things for all people. So I can help you through your healing process at the expense of my own, right? And again, going back to that permission piece, giving ourselves permission to heal. And, I can't do this right now. Being able to set, like Erica is saying right now, to set the boundary. I have to set a boundary here, because being a part of this is damaging me. So I can't be there for you, and giving ourselves permission, and being okay with the response. Because I think, again, a lot of times in our communities and our families, the expectation is, no, if I'm dishing it to you, you have to be the one to take it. And that's not the reality that we have to live in anymore. So
that's so true. Oh my goodness, that is absolutely true. And again, when you are kind of seen as a bit of a healer, a good listener, everyone wants to speak with you, and everyone wants your time. And I honestly find that you just, I couldn't agree anymore with what you said. Like, you're absolutely right. But to echo your sentiment, it is about finding balance. It is about making sure that you are honest with folks. And honestly, I think that you take that not just to people, but you take that honestly on with the work that you're doing, and you take it on with the projects that you are a part of. You have to be honest. I'm working with a group of an amazing group of people on a documentary right now regarding City and Poly. And there are times when I'm not available to do certain things. So I have to be upfront and honest about it. You know what I mean? I have to say, hey, I'm struggling right now with A, B, and C, so I'm not going to be able to do this. But with regard to people, I think that sometimes what it's good to do, because people are generally, that's one of the hardest things, just like Kizzy is saying, like, it's difficult to communicate that to people, that you're not able to be, again, a part of that help phase. But the reality is, it's okay for you to do that, because essentially you do have to take care of yourself, and also letting that person know that you're not capable of helping in that way will also allow them opportunity. Sometimes you got to put a positive spin on things. It'll allow them opportunity to potentially find someone that is able to give them the time and the effort and love. And again, it doesn't mean that we love those people any less. It just means that, you know what, I'm not able to offer what you need at this time. And I don't need you to check with me. I'll let you know when I'm able to do that, right? So we have to kind of put that positive spin on it. And when we're honest and we're transparent and we're letting them know those things, it again gives them the opportunity to find people who can essentially help them more than we're able to at this time. So it's tough, it's awkward, but it's necessary.
And it's necessary for our healing. I'm in this big self-care and healing push, and I'm calling it a movement, right? And
yes.
People think that self-care looks like I'm getting my nails done, I'm getting a massage, I'm going on vacation, and that's great.
Right.
Self-care also looks like setting boundaries, right? Self-care also looks like making my therapy appointment. Self-care also looks like I'm gonna stop this conversation before it goes any further, right? Self-care also looks like those things. Those things are, soul care. Those things are feeding my soul. Those things are helping my soul to heal. And I can take all the vacations I want. I can get all the manicures I want. I can get my hair done every 2 weeks. If I haven't dealt with this, if I haven't given myself true permission, I'm going to look good on the outside, but internally, I'm still meeting everybody else's needs at the expense of my own, especially when I'm going through cycles of grief and loss. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I was going to add to that. First of all, no question about it. And I think that, and you'll find that, I'm sure you know this, and that's why I definitely want your views on it. We have to be careful of the language that we use often. I think that I find that with regard to self-care, we set ourselves up. And I have to tell people all the time, you cannot set yourself up. Hashtag soul care. Just like you said, thank you, Kizzy. Just like you said, Doc, like you said, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. We have to be careful of the language that we use. When we say things like, here's my number, call me anytime. And then you're angry because they're calling you 4 o'clock in the morning. Like you said, call me anytime, right? Emails. If you know what I mean? Like, hey, you tell people, I check my email all the time. So you're going to have people sending you emails on Sundays. It's going to happen. So you kind of have to be careful of the language that you're using when you're telling people to get in contact with you. Things like that help with your self-care. And you also have to kind of set limits for yourself. Stay away from the email. Don't check the email till Monday, because those things will definitely inhibit you kind of getting that soul care that we so desperately need, in addition to the other things that we do for ourselves.
And it can be done with, I want to acknowledge both two comments that Kizzy and Matt said before we continue, but it can be done in a way that's healing to both of you. A lot of times, one of the things that I always tell people, when people talk about triggering people, both survivors and supporters of survivors of trauma have to realize that the trauma has already been lived through, right? You have already survived. That in and of itself makes you a survivor, right? You have already survived one of the worst things or the worst thing that could have happened to you. You are already stronger than you realize. And so one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing, and I talk about this when we do our trauma talks, and we'll talk about this on next Tuesdays, Dr. Tara, but making sure that we're not getting involved in this trauma triangle where we feel like we have to be the rescuers. Because one, I can't rescue a survivor. And when I rescue you, I put you in a victim role, right? And so I keep you dependent on me, and I keep me dependent on continuing to rescue you. So neither one of us are progressing in our healing journey. And so one of the best things that we can do, when I realize, it's above me, I say it's above me and it's below me. Right? It's above me now.
I love it.
I'm going to refer you out, right? I'm going to refer you to some. Are you willing to talk to this person? Are you willing to talk to this person? And that lets you know too. And we have to be honest with this too. I can't be the only person in your village. I can't, right? You got to get another village because it's too much. If it's too much for you to bear, it's going to be way too much for me to bear. And so just encouraging people, I can help you get started. I can help you, with some things or some conversations, but taking that onus off of ourselves and putting it back on the rightful owner, because, even though, you're not responsible for your dad's suicide, you are responsible for your healing from it. Right. And that puts the onus on you, and it allows you to figure out things about yourself, beautiful parts of yourself that you would have never known had you been dependent on someone else. And so I think we break that stigma of feeling like we have to rescue people, because when I rescue you, I'm literally setting up the cycle for codependency to happen. And neither one of us are going to get any further in this journey.
That's right. That's exactly right. And just like you said, again, to just kind of echo your sentiments. It's important for people to realize, and you said it, that we are the biggest advocate for our own healing. So when we're able to take that on, and yes, we have to find different resources, we have to find people to assist us, but we can't just kind of, like you said, take our trauma and then set it into someone else's lap. That's not okay. It's not fair to them, and it's also not fair to us, because part of healing ourselves, part of strengthening ourselves, is finding ways for us to cope, finding different things that we can use for our toolbox, and then finding behaviors that we can change to help with our own healing process. Again, you are your best advocate. We have to be our own best advocate. We have to figure out ways to heal ourselves. And then we also have to be good listeners. Like, we have to make sure that we're taking advantage of the resources that you're putting out there. It's like, yes, I could go to someone else, but I would rather you do it. And it's like, no, if I'm not able to do it, then you have to find someone else. There are a lot of people who are equipped to do certain things. And that's why, again, I put out there so often, I am a mental health advocate. I am not Dr. Tara. I don't have the skills, the intelligence, the beauty. I don't have any of that. So that being the case, it's like I'm an advocate. So what I can do is, and this is something that friends of mine, once my inbox kind of started really jumping with people like, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you, that type of thing. It was like, okay, what's the correct way? Like, I'm like, I see people kind of opening the door to healing, but again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. So I went to some of my friends, Dr. Kizzy Petrell, amazing. My sis, Erica Cook, both amazing therapists, social workers. And they said, yes, the first thing you make sure you tell them is, again, you're an advocate. You are not a therapist. You are not a counselor. And that you can send them to some people that either you vetted, or, I was comfortable using some people that they vetted, that they can, again, find the healing. So obviously being able to put people in contact with resources is important. Acknowledging to them, you know what, oh man, I'm so glad that you felt comfortable speaking to me, but I would be doing you a great disservice if I did A, B, and C. So what I want to do is I want to put you in contact with someone who can, and obviously I'll be here. I'm going to be one of your greatest cheerleaders. I'm going to do that for you. But here are some folks who can definitely help you out. And then these are some people who you can be in contact, who you can be put in contact with, that'll be able to kind of help you with the healing process.
Definitely. As we continue on, and I have one more question for you before we get to your 3 takeaways. When you think about your personal journey with grief and loss, and the loss of your father to suicide, how has that impacted you in your own fatherhood journey, as far as things that you share with your sons, or just a platform to allow them to share their full range of emotions as a father to two Black boys, right? You're raising two beautiful Black boys. How has this impacted you as a father?
Two very active Black boys. Oh my goodness, something else. It's like, look, I'm in the house and I'm surprised they're so quiet. It might have been, you better be quiet. But I think that dealing with the death of my father, dealing with the relationship that I have with my mom, has really probably been, again, two of the absolute biggest things that has affected me as a parent. But with particular attention to the loss of my dad, it has given me, like, my father was, and again, I spent 12 years of my life with him, was the absolute best father, hands down. I'm sure a lot of people would probably say the exact same thing about their fathers who were in their lives, but my father, for the time that he was here, was the absolute best father. I mean, funny, encouraging. Yeah, come on, let's go out and I'm going to teach you guys how to play tennis. I'm going to teach you guys how to play croquet. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. He was the absolute best father. So that's absolutely something that I wanted to be. I want to be that guy with my kids. He walked around and he did dances and he sung and he danced. And I didn't know the things that he was masking for us, but I saw that he pushed himself to be the absolute best father he could be. So that's the exact same thing that I wanted to do. With regard to grief and loss, one of the biggest things, again, I tend to put kind of positive spins on things. I want to make sure that my boys are mindful. I want them to make sure that they are grateful, that they show gratitude, and it is hard to kind of get them to that way.
You're just depositing in it.
Oh my goodness, I'm just like, that's it. And I'm like my kids, I'm like, oh, y'all so privileged. Y'all just have all this stuff, and y'all have so much more stuff than what we had when we were younger. Right. But I push them to show gratitude for the things that they have, and again, it's because, my dad isn't here anymore. So appreciate the people in your life. I don't always go around saying appreciate me, but you know what? Yes, appreciate me, man. I'm working hard for you. Do you realize how hard I'm working for you? I love you guys. I want them to be exposed to everything. I always believe that exposure is okay, but then I want to always take that a step further, and they need to have experiences. Like we throw around exposure a lot. Exposure is okay, it's good, but they need to experience things. So I push my kids to experience things. But again, it's just the gratitude, being grateful, being loving, being kind, really showing your best self. Because the reality is, and they've dealt with death a couple times with like cousins and things of that nature. So they really struggle kind of understanding like exactly what it means. But again, it just pushes me to kind of tell them, hey, just be grateful for your mom. My oldest son asked me a little while ago, is it okay for me to not go to college? And the first thing I thought of was, man, my father in education. Oh, he loved education. But I'm like, he's like, I really want to start a YouTube channel. So I'm like, I mean, look, if you can take care of you, your family, and your mom, then you know what? Hey, I'm with it. Let's start this business. Let's get this business started, that type of thing. But I want to definitely pour into them the things that my father poured into me and some of the things that he didn't. Another thing is, I talk about my dad. I talk about him. He was in the military, Army veteran, Purple Heart recipient. Like he was, just an amazing guy, amazing guy. And I tell them that. And for them, like, as far as they know about Army is what they see on TV, or really, I would say like video games and stuff like that. But it's like, nah, like your grandfather fought in Vietnam. It's like, well, what's Vietnam? Like, that type of thing. It's like, yeah, he fought in a war. He was in the Army. Both of their grandfathers, as a matter of fact, fought in Vietnam. But again, I talk about them. I tell them about them. I tell them, different things about them so that they can understand. And again, like I said, I can't say it enough. Being grateful and being mindful of every day, appreciating every day is probably the best thing that I can kind of pour and impart into them, because my dad, I think, had a short life. He lived to be, I think, about 45 years old, but he had so much living that he could have done beyond that, and he chose a different route. So I tell them, hey, look, you have to appreciate life. Yeah, I know one of my oldest, he hates school. We can't stand it. But I'm like, look, you'll appreciate it later. Go through your day, enjoy it. We pray before we go into the school building. You know what I mean? Shouts to my pastor, Paul Grant. Pray with your children before they go in, if that's what you choose to do, so that he can have a great day at school. But I really just pour into them, and I push into them, and I tell them to try to appreciate every single day. Not to be like kind of this like harbinger of death, but just appreciate every day. Appreciate every day. Let's have a great day today, and kind of have that positivity. Because when you deal with when the possibility of dealing with loss at any time happens, again, they lost a cousin to a violent crime. Right. And it's rough for them, so they don't always fully understand it. So instead, it's just about appreciate every day. Be kind to the people who are around you. You know, make sure that you tell people you love them. Don't you know that? And that's one thing that is weird. Like I said, I always kind of piggyback between my mom and my father. I can literally probably count on my hand the amount of times my mom has said, "I love you." Again, we're healing that relationship. But my dad, all the time. I love you, son. I love you, son. I love you, son. And it's something I've kind of put into, it's my mantra. Hey, I tell my kids I love them all the time. So they're these really like lovey-dovey kids. People are like, wow, they're really affectionate. Exactly. That's kind of how I raised them up. So when you're dealing with grief and you're dealing with loss of someone, you try to be everything. I try to be everything that my dad was, but I'm Tsanonda. So I do it. I put my own spin on it, but I kind of push that and make sure that I'm doing the things that I need to make sure they understand that they're loved, and we can kind of appreciate each other again. We can appreciate one another every single day.
Yes, and just thank you for that. And I want to echo Matt's sentiment about, we're evolutionaries. We're changing the whole face of fatherhood, would in turn change the way our children are being raised. And his comment and what you were just saying reminded me of my talk last week, which was on co-parenting. And I did a co-parenting with my ex-husband, and how his relationship with our daughter is so healing for me, because I think subconscious, my parents divorced when I was very young and my father was not present. And that is a different type of loss. He was alive, but I went 15 years without seeing him. And in my mind, I thought that the end of the relationship meant the end of parenting, right? And just the narrative that you're able to change that, a relationship can change or transition, but I can still take the tools, I can still take the gems, I can still take that relationship, or that relationship doesn't have to change, and just changing the face of what parenting and fatherhood looks like. Not only are you, breaking down stigmas associated with grief and loss, you're breaking down stigmas of what Black fatherhood looks like, and creating a narrative for your children, and just the strength and the authenticity that has to come with that. I just want to applaud you for that, because, in dealing with your own issues, that gives sons something less that they have. It takes something off of their plate that wasn't theirs to begin with, right? And when I'm healing generations to come.
No question. And that's such an important part. I think about, and again, you probably know better than me. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard that that statistically the chance of your child dealing with depression heightens when parents suffer from depression, right? So because of that, we have to be mindful of ourselves. And I'm not saying, just be like fake and phony, but you have to, again, figure out ways to heal yourself and strengthen yourself so that you're able to, again, pour into your young people love and care and appreciate and this healthy appreciation for life and what it means. And then when you speak about like co-parenting and how important that is with regard to mental health and understanding loss, a lot of people tend to say that loss is strictly loss of a parent, but people can lose jobs, people can lose relationships, they can lose friends, you know what I mean? So when you're to kind of bring that back to kind of co-parenting, it's not supposed to be a loss, even if mom and dad aren't together. It shouldn't be a loss for our children. Dr. Kim Green, who I think is watching this, and who said a couple of comments, #Noodle, is my youngest son's mom. And I forgot, she told me to make sure that I plug our soon to be coming co-parenting book. We're actually going to be writing a book on co-parenting soon, which I think will be amazing. We would love your insight on. You and Wayne, hold us down. But one of the important things for us is to make sure that our children know that they are all being loved on, because they're gonna ask questions. Let me tell you, I was driving. I went to pick up my son. He lives with his mom in Bowie. He's here for the summer. But I was driving to pick him up, and at 6 years old, he asked me, I have a question for you, Daddy. I'm trying to figure out why you can't just come live with me and Mommy. I don't get it. And it's like, wow. And again, he knows Danae, loves Danae. It's like, obviously it's nothing against my wife. It's nothing against her. He's just trying to figure it out. Like, I don't understand. Like, just tell me why. And I had to explain to him, well, because again, in his mind, again, it's a bit of a loss not having dad every day. And the fact that Dalen, who a lot of people think is my biological son, but he's not. He's Danae's son. Again, we're co-parenting. But again, he's my son. That's my baby. That's my oldest boy. But Kai needed to know, like, why? I don't understand why. Like, why can't this happen? So I had to kind of tell him about appreciating the village that we're building. We're building a village here. You are blessed to have two moms that love you. You're blessed to have a dad that loves you dearly. So that just means your family is so big. You're going to have this huge family that loves you, and make sure that you're getting all the things that you need to be successful. So again, that's a part of loss. In young people's minds, for them, not experiencing my mom and my dad in the house every single day is a loss for them. So we have to be mindful of that. And we also have to—
And they go through those stages. They go through those stages of grief and loss, the same stages, yes.
You get it. You get it. So again, it's just vital for us to talk with our young people and explain to them how things are going. But again, it's also vital to try our best to build and fortify strong relationships. Like, I needed Dr. Kim Green and Danae Edwards to be able to coexist and speak with each other and talk with each other, because again, I don't want my children to experience loss. People sometimes look crazy, like, yeah, well, Kai and Dalen are going to, Kim's house for the weekend. They're going, and they're like, what? Dalen's going to? Yeah, that's village. That's co-parenting.
That's family.
Again, that's family. And again, to take it back again, to steer it back to grief and loss, I also don't want there to be— anytime there's a time that my children can spend time with one another, I want them to be able to have that. I don't want them to suffer loss in that way. Not being able to spend certain weekends because, okay, Kai's going with his mom, so now you just can never see him anymore. Nah, Dr. Kim Green say, no, bring him on, give me his Six Flags pass. We're going to go have a good time. And that's, you know what I mean? And that's what love is about. And that's what family is about. And that's what setting the parameters so that our children don't have to experience loss in those ways once going through those stages that you talked about.
All right, Tsanonda, so we are at time. I want to thank you. Time flies. I mean, it flies. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to leave people with 3 takeaway points. I know you have 3 and a bonus.
Yes.
3 takeaway points for when you think about your journey, for men, for fathers, for people supporting their brothers, their husbands, their sons who have experienced loss. I'm trauma-informed care. Everybody has experienced trauma, right? I treat everybody from that vantage point. What would be your tips for people experiencing this or going through their own journey?
Absolutely. So the tips that I have are, like you said, I have 3 and a bonus. There are tips that you can use just for mental health in general, but I think that particularly with grief and loss, it's important. But the reality is, Dr. Tara, you being the amazing person that you are, we've actually touched on each and every last one of them.
Awesome. And I didn't even know.
Seriously, man, you did that without even knowing. You're good. You're so good. But I call it kind of like 3 S's and a T. So the first S is self-care. We talked about that. you have to be able to take care of yourself. You have to be your biggest advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I always say that you have to get in touch with what I call the nouns of you that'll help you kind of get through your grieving period, your loss period, any type of mental health stigma. The nouns of you are the people, the places, the things. The people you need to be around or be in touch with, the places that you can go to that you enjoy. I don't care whether it's a museum, it can be a park, it can be whatever those things that make you kind of feel better about yourself or make you kind of have positive thoughts of the person that you may have lost. And then that final thing are the things that you need. They're always pictures are always good to kind of bring back positive memories. And just Bibles are good. Some people just like their Bible. You know what I mean? That's what it is. Just the things that you have to do. So again, the first thing would be self-care, taking care of or being in contact with, and write those things down, the nouns of you. Write those things down if necessary. The second S would be a support system. We talked about that. You have to make sure you're including the most positive people in your support system. Everybody's grieving process is different, and that being the case, when your grieving process is different, you still have to kind of find people who are going to be able to kind of support you through your process. So support system is important. That means your friends, that means your family, that means potentially coworkers who can kind of, again, aid you in your process. And like Matt said, who will allow you or will kind of create the safe space for you to be transparent enough to aid, again, in your own healing. The next S I say is, for the 3 S's, is spirituality. Everyone doesn't always agree with that. It's kind of a sticky subject for people. But even though I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, I am still a Christian. Again, shouts to my pastor, Paul Grant, Greater Life Ministries. He has helped me to heal that. Jehovah's Witnesses have kingdom halls, but it's church hurt. It is what it is. Everyone kind of knows about that. But regardless of what spirituality you are seeking, I don't care whether it's Islam, Christianity, whatever, Buddhism, whatever it is, spirituality helps you in certain ways. It grounds you. It kind of allows you to kind of look for that kind of higher purpose and things of that nature. So if you choose to have a spirituality, then I would suggest that. And the last thing, again, we talked about it, is therapy. 3 S's and a T. Therapy is huge, huge, huge. I literally would not be where I am today without understanding the importance of therapy. I think I understood the importance, but I never just made the decision to actually go through it. And when you're able to get therapy, when you're able to go through grief counseling, it's huge. It's such a big deal. And one thing that I always like to tell people is, we tend to, when we have physical ailments, or let's talk about our children, for instance, being a dad. If I have my young people, I have my babies at a pediatrician, and I'm not really digging how the pediatrician is going, I don't just swear off pediatricians. Like I find the one that's a better fit for me, my family, my children. We have to start looking at therapy the same way. If you find a therapist that's not really meeting or matching your needs, you have to be willing to go out there and find a therapist that's a lot better for you. What works for me is a Christian woman therapist. It works for me. For whatever reason, I found my biggest kind of strides in my healing process in that arena. I've heard people say, well, my therapist walks in the park with me. I've heard men, and that's something that they do. Some men need a male therapist. Do it. Yes, do it. Whatever works for you. Like I said, my therapist, Akami McCoy, she's the greatest. She sends me scriptures on occasion because that's what I need. Things of that nature. So again, don't just swear off therapy. Find a therapist that works for you. And then I think that will be, again, an added resource. Again, it's not up to therapists to heal you. They're guides. They're going to guide you through your process of healing. So a lot of the work is ours. So again, 3 S's and a T: self-care, support systems, spirituality, and therapy. I think bonus one, therapy will probably be the best way to help yourselves out.
Oh, this was so awesome, Tsanonda. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't want to end without plugging your book, plugging your organization that is geared around this. If people want to connect with you, can you let them know how they can connect with you, support you, get the services that they need that are, grounded in self-care, that are grounded in your 3 S's and a T?
Absolutely. Please, again, above it all, the organization I started with, my partners, my guys from day one from high school, James, Mike, and Brandon. It's called Above It All. Our website is www.aiahealth.org. Again, it offers PR. We offer PRP services for young people ages 5 to 17. The phone number is 410-462-2268. Myself, again, a mental health advocate, author of The Extraordinary Mr. Nobody. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm actually going to be publishing the book. I don't have personal copies of the book, but I've been signed to a publisher. So the book is going to be revamped and then put out again, hopefully spread to schools and things of that nature. That's the goal. But it is available on Amazon. Just search Tsanonda. There's not too many of me's out there. There's not too many Tsanondas out there. So search Tsanonda, you'll be fine. But please also check out my website, www.tsanondacares.com. TSANONDA cares, CARES.
And I will also add in the comments to other organizations. So if you're just starting out and you want a social group, Matt Pressberry, founder of Black Fathers Foundation on Facebook, another awesome, national organization, international organization,
yes,
part of that, where men can be support agents to one another. I'm also going to put resources for Roberta's House, which is an organization in Baltimore that offers grief and loss counseling.
Right.
Gilchrist Hospice also offers wonderful grief and loss counseling. Nami, I will put them all in the comments. Maurice, I don't want to end without acknowledging your comment. I want to just put you to one of those things. So acknowledging grief and loss support groups if people feel like they're becoming numb, which is one of the things that we talked about. So support, and building our village. And Tsanonda, thank you so very much. I want to thank everybody for staying over. We went over our time, but it was such a good conversation. But please tune in with me next Tuesday for Dr. Tara Tuesdays. I'm going to be talking about just finishing up our celebration of Dope Black Dads. You are wonderful into this, Tsanonda. We're going to be looking at something called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences and Trauma, and how they impact us. Tune in next Tuesday. Join me right here, Facebook Live. As always, let's heal together. Tsanonda, again, much thanks and appreciation. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Thank you for all that you are doing, Dr. Tara. I tell you, you're amazing. Thank you. Please keep doing what you're doing. Let's change lives. Absolutely.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Amen.
All right, peace, everyone.
Yes. Good night.